On behalf of Friends of the Lost Coast and the Bureau of Land Management King Range National Conservation Area, welcome to Lost Coast Lectures. My name is Justin Krellin, Executive Director of Friends of the Lost Coast, and tonight we host Peter Haggard and Jane Monroe, authors of the book Rewilding, Native Gardening for the Pacific Northwest and North Coast. Peter Haggard holds a BS in Wildlife Management from Cal Poly Humboldt and worked for the Humboldt County Agricultural Commissioner's Office as an agricultural inspector and biologist for 35 years. He has taught garden-related courses at College of the Redwoods and Cal Poly Humboldt Extension and classes in entomology and pest identification for the UC Master Gardener program. He is co-author with Judy Haggard of Insects of the Pacific Northwest and has written many articles on insects and gardening. Since 1977, he's been landscaping his garden using native plants to attract endemic wildlife. Jane Monroe has a BS and an MA in biology from Cal Poly Humboldt. Her master's thesis was a study of the dune silver bee. She has worked as a biology zoology lecturer at Cal Poly Humboldt and as a field biologist conducting habitat reviews for Northern California plant and animal species. Thanks to both of you for joining us to present Rewilding, Native Gardening of the Pacific Northwest and North Coast. The floor is yours.
The name of the book, while I think many people living in southern Humboldt don't see a real need in rewilding, they probably already live in areas that are quite untouched. But remember, we live in California and politics play a huge part. And I think as things deteriorate in many areas, particularly water or power, the people that vote in large numbers are the ones that live in Southern California. So I think if we can start people thinking about opening up urban areas where every couple of blocks or something like that has a natural landscape where people can actually walk to it and see it, not maybe go to Yellowstone National Park once a year and feel they've fulfilled their duty to nature. So it's more than just rewilding this area. It's to get people to think about rewilding over a large area of landscape.
Okay, so welcome. Hi, everybody. I'm Jane, and I'm going to start off with telling you a little bit about my my own rewilding journey, and then I'm going to turn you over to Pete, and he's going to show you some more very cool long-term stuff. I haven't been rewilding as long as Pete has, so I'm still beginning, and this is kind of what I am working on right now. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about it. There we go. Okay. Hold on, let me just fix that. There we don't need to see ourselves. Okay, so this is a little piece of my yard that I've just started rewilding. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I go about rewilding as I go along in this process. And this is a piece of my yard that used to be fully covered with Himalayan blackberry. And so a couple of years ago, my husband and I pulled out all the blackberry, which is a huge job, of course. And we started to replace it with some native plants. There's evergreen huckleberry started in there now, and elderberry and dogwood. And this right here is an ocean spray, which is a really cool native plant. And once it gets a little bigger, it's going to start blooming fantastically and look like this. So it's a really beautiful plant that is native. And I point out this one because this one, it's a good example of what happens when you start to rewild. If you're planting some native plants, you're going to start attracting native animals that need those plants and rely on those plants. This little picture up here is the fairy moth, which is a very tiny moth with unusually long antennae. And it only lays its eggs on ocean spray. So if there's no ocean spray, if you're looking at just a yard full of ornamentals but no native plants like ocean spray, there's nowhere for this moth to live. It has to have ocean spray to lay eggs. So I'm hoping to get fairy moths in my yard soon as things go along. As I continue with the rewilding, I've first started with the bigger shrubs and things you can see. And once they get bigger, then I'll start putting in ground covers and things underneath where all the chips are. So that's kind of the beginning part of rewilding, is starting with the larger plants and then working down to the smaller ones. And as you go along, even as you get started, you start to see more native wildlife. Last summer, 2 summers ago, I was my husband and I were lucky enough to have gray foxes set up a den underneath our deck, of all places. These photos were taken through the window, looking out at our backyard where they spent the summer. The vixen and her mate had 3 kits, and so here's 2 of them playing. And they had a good time in our partially rewilded yard, chasing and catching gophers and voles, which was something that made me happy, because it's nice to keep the gophers and voles out of my vegetable garden. And so the foxes were happy back here as our rewilding went along. I'm hoping they'll come back again. For people who don't have a big yard that can support the larger wildlife like this, even a little bit of rewilding is still going to attract smaller wildlife like spiders, which are kind of like the foxes in that they're good at controlling pests. So I was happy to see these garden spiders in my garden controlling pests that would eat my vegetable plants, right? This spider has made an egg sac here, and she was happy enough to guard her babies here, and then I got to watch all the little spiderlings hatch out. So that was really cool. One of the side benefits of rewilding is getting to watch all these cool little things that happen in nature, right? I'm sure some of you guys have seen some of this really cool stuff happen too. Like spiders being born and tadpoles swimming in a pond. What could be better, right? For people who are really into attracting more wildlife, a water feature is a really, really helpful thing. So I've got a trough here that my husband and I set up, and we filled it with water, and it's home to red-legged frogs. You can see the young frog down in the corner here. And there are some stickleback fish in there that we put in. They're native fish. And there's all kinds of aquatic insects living in there, like back swimmers and things. And the frogs are getting ready to breed in there. They were making a lot of noise last night. It's sometimes hard to sleep with all the cacophony, but I love it. So it's okay. We've got the red-legged frogs, and the water feature also, of course, attracts the little Pacific tree frogs, which are the ones responsible for the bulk of the noise. Yeah. So they've laid a bunch of eggs in the pond right now. There are also some tadpoles in there. Dragonfly larvae also like to live in the pond. If you don't know, dragonflies start out as aquatic when they're larval, and then here's what their shape is like when they're ready to hatch out and become adults. They climb up out of the water, and they basically molt into an adult. And so here's a just molted adult, just now become an adult dragonfly. It's yellow right now, but it's going to turn bright red very quickly because it's a cardinal meadowhawk. And so that's our dragonfly life, and a water feature is really good for attracting dragonflies if you like dragonflies. So between all the native plants that are starting to happen, like the monkey flower in the background there, we're starting to get a lot more native animals in our yard. And so even though we're nowhere near fully rewilded with our yard, just even starting or doing a patch of your yard is a good place to start. You'll get some critters, and the plants will be happy too. Before I let you guys go, I want to say a word to any of you who are fellow cat enthusiasts like me. Cats can be a controversial bit when it comes to native wildlife. They've got a bad rap. My solution is the catio. If you kind of look closely, you can see that we've got deer fencing set up, and so we've got a little piece of the yard fenced off for the cats, and they can come in and out of this as they please. They go in the house through a cat flap and they can hang out in their little catio, but they can't run loose. They can't run wild all over the neighborhood. And this is good for both the cats and the wildlife. It's great for the wildlife because now my cats can't catch the birds and the frogs. The birds and the frogs are safe. And it keeps the cats safe from dogs and wildlife and cars. So it's a win-win for everybody. And the catio can just be can still be a part of your rewilded yard. This yellow flower up here is called cat's ears. And that grows in the catio, and this one has a native bee pollinating it.
Cat's ears is a horrible weed, but it's in a good place. She's got it all fenced in, so hopefully it'll never get out.
It can't escape. No, not at all. So that's my plug for the catio and my beginning journey with rewilding. And I'm going to turn you over to Pete with his more advanced rewilding, so to speak.
All right. Thank you, Jane, and Cheryl Lynn, thank you. All right, this is a book about using California native plants in your garden to attract pollinators. We don't focus on one thing like monarchs, native bees, birds, etc., but on a landscape restoration and biodiversity using endemic plants to attract species of wildlife displaced by urbanization. So that's a huge difference from I've given talks down there many times, and this is a real change. I'm not asking you to replace your beautiful ornamentals with beautiful native plants. I'm asking you to look at the big picture on this. A lot of areas around Humboldt Bay have this slough sedge in it, and people often come up to me and say, how can I get rid of it? And it is a beautiful plant. And if you have a good eye there, you can see the larvae that feed on that. And being a beautiful plant, it is very competitive. Most weeds we think of cannot make an entrance on a healthy place where the slough ledge is very common. All right, and along with that is that larva that you see, and it's called a tenucid moth larva, and we'll show you the adult in a minute, but often people ask about grasses. And to me, the tufted hair grass you see here on the left with the lupin and the Revularis lupin in there is one of the most beautiful grasses, I think, in California. And it's very common around the bay, and in the fall when it turns golden, it's just an absolutely gorgeous plant. All right, that tenucid larva turns into these beautiful insects, and without the grasses, natural grasses, obviously it's not an insect that can live in a lawn where lawnmowers would be running over it. It requires tall grass, but it is extremely common in coastal Humboldt County if you let it survive. And on the right-hand side is their cocoon. We have these on our house every year. All right, I'm going to talk about an extremely important plant in California, and that's manzanita. And right in the middle there, you can see Anna's hummingbird. And why are manzanita so important? Because they are found all over California. Many species and many animals depend on them, particularly hummingbirds. And when these are blooming very early, manzanita can start blooming in November. That is when there's almost no other plants flowering, and manzanita produce both nectar and pollen. So bumblebees coming out at that time, this is an extremely important plant for them. And just so I could add one little thing is I don't believe in putting out red Kool-Aid for hummingbirds. This is a natural plant, and we shouldn't be feeding them.
So plant manzanita instead.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we have at least 4 in our area common bumblebees, even though I think total for Humboldt County is probably closer to 10 to 15. but this is one of the very common ones right now, the black-tailed. And again, these will come out very early, well before winter is done. And they come out when we have a couple of warm days. And the queens, which this is a queen, the queens come out and get nectar. They don't get any pollen because they need nectar to get them through their period of dormancy in the winter. And they need this so when spring arrives, the queen can build a nest, build the containers for the pollen and nectar, lay the eggs, take care of the eggs and larvae, and raise that first generation, which will be little tiny bumblebees because they don't get fed as well as they could. But each generation after that, the queen gets more and more workers to the point in midsummer that the bumblebee workers are getting quite big. All right. Like many people, I believe an orchard is something we need to have. I do a lot of canning and things like that. And an apple tree or pear, whatever, blooms for maybe 2 to 3 weeks out of the year. And what's available for the bees after that? Well, a good idea, I think, is to put native plants at the base of it. And here you see Sedelcia, which is a mallow, a native mallow. And you see also Clarkia. And both of those plants are really have large flowers. People really like them, and they bloom over a long period of time. And so they provide nectar and pollen for many, many different bees and pollinators. So these are an excellent plant to use in your orchard to help keep bees and pollinators happy. What plants to start with? I believe aster. If you grow ornamentals, you probably know asters are very common in the nursery trade, and that's because they produce huge amounts of flowers. And if you're looking at a long-term relationship with your landscape where you have flowers early in the spring all the way until late in the fall, asters keep the ones in the fall, the pollinators happy because they start flowering in mid to late summer, and they usually will continue to flower until frost. So they're an excellent plant to use, and they are aggressive. They can take care of themselves in a grassy area and do quite well. There's another bumblebee, the Bombus mixus. That's one of the 4 that are very common. And the tripart bee, very, very common in our local area. You can see in the flower there. And so very important to late season pollinators. And to add to that, the field crescent butterfly only lays its eggs on that aster. And this is, I established a native plant wildlife garden in Arcata where I grow a lot of this plant aster. And I get at least 4 generations a year on a fairly small area. So it's easy to keep this butterfly happy. And on the left-hand side, you can see the larva. What's the best, some of the best plants for a garden? I would put alders first, but we're talking about urban gardens, and that's probably not going to be, it'll be too big for most gardens. But we have a huge amount of willows in Humboldt County, from fairly small to this particular one, the shining willow, which is the yellow flowered one, probably the prettiest willow in California when it's in bloom, and produce tons and tons of early flowers. And here we can see some of the critters that use that pollen. This is an Andrena bee, and it tells you 2 things. It tells you that it's a female bee because it has pollen on its back legs. and that it's a bee. There's no, bees look a lot like wasps. The big difference is wasps don't have any areas on their body where they can concentrate pollen and take it back to their nest if they want. So that's a female, easy to identify. Chrysomela larva, there's numerous different species, many of them really beautiful reds and blacks and yellows, different colors. That you see the larva below them, you see those white spots on them. If you see that on your willow, press down on it and it will ooze a chemical that smells fairly strong and protects them against predators. All right, checker bloom is certainly one of my favorites. I wouldn't have a garden without it. It's a mallow, and like a lot of mallows, it has large flowers and small leaves, so it produces a lot of color in the season. Particularly, they often grow in wet spots, so if you keep a little water on it, it will start early spring and it'll go all the way to the end of fall. And there's at least 4 butterflies that use checker bloom. And this is just one of them. This is one I get every year, the gray hair streak. And you can see to the right of that, there's the flower, and that is the larva of this particular butterfly. And that's what hair streak larvae look like. They kind of look like a green slug. Oh, so we have food for adult and immature stages of wildlife. What about a home or a place to reproduce? This is a home where Judy and I live. We haven't reproduced there yet, and we've been married 50 years, so probably not happening. You can see the house. In front of the house is the orchard. I do espalier. You can see apples, grapes, peach tree, blueberries. You can also see our garden, our vegetable garden, and you'll notice those planks there. I want to talk about that, but you can notice in the garden there's a lot of bare soil, and that's really important. Again, this is the same garden a little later, probably in the year, but all the brown material is last year's green manure, which I'll work in. And you can see this year's green manure all the way to the left, crimson clover. That's what I use for green manure. And I have vegetables one year and then the crimson clover the next. And again, you see the boards that I use. But you can also, in our vegetable garden, we get a lot of gophers. I don't kill them unless they threaten me. But what I do is I try to wash their holes down where the excess soil is deposited on top. I wash that all the way down to their main tunnel, and that usually stops them. But it also provides an area for toads and frogs to spend the day. It's dark, it's cool, it's near a source of water. And so they can come out. And remember, frogs and toads come out at night when slugs and snails come out. They like the high
humidity.
The humidity in the air. They're more comfortable. I don't know how many of you know Ramone's in McKinleyville, but I'm often there in the late afternoon sipping a cup of coffee and enjoying myself. And this particular time, someone yelled while I was sitting outside and said, "There's a wasp. There's a yellow jacket coming out." And so I immediately grabbed my camera, ran over there, and it turned out to be a native bee, the metallic green bee. And if you see, this is it's a cement with pebbles in it area, but there's a teeny area where there's a strip of soil, and there were actually 5 separate nests in that area. And this just tells you that nature wants to survive. They will take as little as we give them, and if it's enough, they will find a home in there. And unfortunately, a lot of people smoke and throw their filter filters contain high levels of nicotine, and they no longer use this area because of that. To get this picture, I had to just sweep it clean of cigarette butts. This is a more common place for them. They do not mind compacted soil. They don't mind if there's not a whole lot of plants around it. In some ways, they like both. But again, you can see that this is a female bee because she has pollen on her legs, and the one bee is going into the nest. On the right-hand side, this is a halictid bee building her nest. And I found when they're starting to build their nest in my vegetable garden, you can tell that they're doing it. They're bringing out moist earth from a spring soil, and they're depositing around the hole. So that hole looks much darker than the soil around it. And when I started learning bees, what I did is I put a flag out so I could watch the whole process. And over a period of time, I don't need to do that. I understand what's going on. And also, when she's done in there and has the cells ready to start putting in pollen and nectar, the left-handed bee is going out there to gather pollen and nectar, put it in the cell, lay an egg, and then seal it. She doesn't take care of the young like a social bee. She is a solitary female, not a queen.
Uh-oh, hold on, everybody. We've got to, there we go.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. And this is just a really common but much larger bee. It isn't a bumblebee. It's called a longhorn bee. And this happens to be a female. And females are the only ones that collect pollen. So if you see a bee and it doesn't have pollen on its legs, it's probably a male. And males have the long horns or long antenna. So the female doesn't have as long as antenna as the males, and that's pretty typical. And there's the hole on the right-hand side. It was actually under what she's sitting on. And I've got to the point now I put things out. She can get under that board and get in there, and it actually hides her entrance from parasitic insects and parasitic bees. All right, I decided when I found out that the vegetable garden was really important for particularly native bees, I had to start making changes in how I treated my garden. I stopped using heavy-duty rototillers and switched to a mini type. It's called a mantis. It only goes down 1 to 2 inches. And I stopped tilling soil before crops like corn, tomatoes, beans, and coal plants because I decided they didn't need it. I've been doing it now for quite a few years, and it seems to make no difference. And by not tilling the soil, that means you do not disturb all the native bees that are nesting in your garden. Okay, I forgot to say that old man there digging in the garden was trying to find out how deep nests were. And this is a leafcutter bee, and this is a partial part of its nest. It had 3 other cells. You're seeing 2 cells here. And the next one will show.
How deep down was this?
I figured that it was a good depth was 9 inches. I didn't want to go anywhere near that. And so with the mini tiller, there's no problem at all. And this is what's inside of one of those cells. You see that huge pollen and nectar ball there. And the larva, that's the bee larva. And you can see it really is quite large. I don't think it's got much longer to before it decides to pupate and change into that. And you can see one thing being sealed in a cell might be a problem if you have to poop and pee in there. And they do, they can't come out. So they figured a way of putting it on the roof, and it keeps it off of their food, which is, if you've raised insects over a period of time like I have, the simplest way to kill them is not keep things extremely clean. And if those were on the food, it would, I'm sure it would kill the larva. And this is what an adult leafcutter bees on gumweed, which is a common weed around the bay here, Humboldt Bay. It's very common. And this shows you they don't keep the pollen on their back legs like mini bees do. They actually keep it on their abdomen. Their abdomen has specialized hairs. And then they put the pollen there, and you can see a yellow area, and that is all pollen. These bees are considered the most efficient bees, even more than honeybees, because by putting the pollen on their tummy, every time they land on another flower, they drag their tummy across it, and so are used as pollinators, but even commercially. The left-hand side is, I think that's a Clarkia flower, and this is cutting a piece. They do love those type of flowers for building their nests, and it's amazing how fast. It's almost like their jaws are scissors. They just go through that. It's even hard to get a picture of it, and you can see this willow. It is highly used by leafcutter bees. Now, some people would say that's damage. I see that's activity, not damage.
I think it's attractive.
All right. Remember, in the beginning I mentioned, and I thought alders in our area are one of the best wildlife from insects on up to birds and even squirrels we have in our yard. And the reason is it's a hardwood. Most woodpeckers like that. There's a many large beetles that use alder that make the holes in them. And you can see these tunnels. This is all insect making those tunnels. So that tree is kind of like an ice box, and it's just full of food. And when it gets older like this, they use it as a nest. And we got to one summer, we got to watch these two back and forth, back and forth. One of them will land and say a few words. This one will stick its head out and say a few words, and then the one that's in the nest will go and look for sap on what is feeding on our insects, and the other one will go in there and stay until the other one comes back, and they do that all day long. And how do they clean their nests out? They put it all in their mouth and spit it out. What can you find under boards in a vegetable garden? Correct if you said a crush of slugs and snails. Okay, I don't know about your garden, but in spring, the boards that I put out can look like this. And I don't know if you use chemicals, but most all chemicals for slugs and snails has been taken off the market. So we are really left with a method that I think is quite successful. I put boards out, and every 2 to 3 days I turn it over and use a hoe on them. And I have the picture on the right. That's called arenator. All of these slugs are introduced by Asian European, and I like all stuff. And I certainly think the arenator slug is a beautiful slug, but it'll be in two when I get my hoe out for sure.
It's a pretty invasive.
It is pretty invasive. What else can you find under boards in a vegetable garden? Help is on the way. All right, these are all fairly large beetles that, in fact, in my garden are in this stage right now, and they're mostly mating. So this is the time when they get together, mate, and start laying eggs and get the process over. So this is just 5 different species of beetles that eat slugs. And these large ones, the thing about them is they can't fly. It looks like they should be able to lift up their hard cover, but they have no wings. So the good thing about them, if they're in your garden and you keep them happy, they will stay there. They have really no options. So if you have a lot of them, and I do, that means they are really happy with all those slugs. This is one of those beetles, and it already has killed this slug. And the best way for a slug to protect itself is to slime these beetles. And so it's important that they kill the slug immediately, and then they start eating on it. And this was eating that until I lifted up the board and kind of scared it. And this is probably everybody's favorite snail killer. And that's a pretty good name, snail killer. And you can see in the mouth there all those teeth and hairs, which it uses to grab them. And although I've seen these slimed where they have to get rid of all that slime, so they've lost. But usually they do win. And why do they have such narrow shoulders and head? Because they're snail killers. They want to be able to get all the way down to the base where they can get all that fresh escargot out.
I've seen them eating slugs too.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't have to eat only snails.
No, yeah. Have you noticed small glowing spots on the ground at night? I can't ask you folks how many know that we have glowworms in Humboldt County, but we have a fair number. This is the best one, in my opinion. This only eats slugs for sure. I don't know if it eats snails, but this is a female, and you can see the base of the female where it's orange, and that's what glows at night. But they're extremely efficient about rapidly injecting poison into the slug so it can't slime them, and then it produces another chemical that liquefies the slug, and then it sucks it back up through the same teeth.
So this is the female. She stays looking like a larva.
She does not change.
Yeah, but
she is actually a beetle, and this is the male, and you can tell it's the male because it has a teeny head and it's got big eyes and a very big antenna. Antenna, if you think of most of them are very narrow, but what this has done in this insect, they have just multiplied the amount of detectors they have on their antenna for one very simple reason. They're looking for a female that wants to mate. And these are common at my place beginning about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in early summer. They're very awkward. They're not meant to eat anything. The only thing they want to do is find a female, and they'll land on our porch, and they'll use those antennae back and forth and back and forth until it gets a sniff of the female, and then it'll go to ground. Because she's on the ground, she's basically a really slow moving larva. I'm going to talk about 2 different salamanders. Salamanders, if you know much about them, often require water. And so in my place, that doesn't work, that I don't have a good spot for them to lay eggs and bring them off. But this one, this California slender salamander, does not require water. It does it in the ground in tunnels. And you can see the teeny legs. It's not good for much, but for slugs and snails and small insects, this is just what you want to have. They're not as tolerant to disturbance, so I keep this on the edge of my garden where there's native plants and things like that, and I don't disturb them like I do with the beetles.
I like this photo because one of those is not a slender salamander, and you have to look closely to find it.
Yes, they definitely look like worms. This is another one that can live without water. It doesn't lay its eggs in water. So it's another good one, very common in my garden. In the winter, when this photo was taken, it came out of that crack in the tree. You can see the mushrooms in there also. But that's a good place for something like a salamander because it's just full of sow bugs and different types of insects, and that's how they make their living. And of course, frogs. I don't know about your area, but it can get so loud here in the Humboldt Bay area with these in the winter that sometimes it's hard to sleep. And this is a tree frog, and I don't know if it's a male or female, but it has its hand on an egg mass, and you can actually see the tadpoles almost ready to leave there. But I do raise these in the sense, maybe we have a picture of it. I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
wait, yeah, we do.
Okay, so I have one of those plastic containers that you can get at a feed store. I think it's maybe 20 gallons or so. And that's easily enough to raise these from eggs to adults. There's no problem. And we get tons and tons. And there's just nothing bad about frogs or toads. And you can see this is the one that's kind of scratching its head, wondering what it's going to be like to breathe air after being in water its whole life up until now. And this is just sort of that, yeah, there's a lot of wildlife. And if you bring them in, you can see on the right that fox sparrow. These are very common in the winter. They come in and you can see all the leaves and things like that. And that's important. I have built up a huge layer of this in my native plant garden. And this is where insects of all kinds spend the winter. And that's why these two, particularly the fox sparrow, is always scratching like a chicken does. It's trying to find insects in there. And this is a really important winter area for getting food for birds like this.
So don't rake up the leaves.
Yes,
Okay.
don't, or burn them. And with all these areas with brush and manzanita and things like that, it allows particularly white-crowned sparrows that like to nest low to the ground to give them shelter and hide their nests. So the more shrubs, the better. All right. This is me with my hand hoe on my knees, killing weeds in my herb garden. And I told you about, we get lots and lots of baby frogs that come out of our pond. And you know, when you're working there by yourself, a nice summer day, and one of these little things comes up and looks at you, I didn't plant it, I didn't put it there, and it kind of makes you happy to be alive, to see that you're doing that. And you're both working on keeping them bugs and weeds down. All right. This is an area in the native plant garden where when we first moved in, I planted all sorts of conifers and native trees that had been in Fieldbrook. That's where I live, in Fieldbrook. And I planted the same type of redwood, Sitka spruce, things that had occurred there forever. And after 50 years, they matured and they produced cones. And this is, after 50 years, this is the first seedling to come up. And because Judy and I don't have children, the idea that we have brought back to this area in Fieldbrook that used to be all Eurasian weeds, we have brought this cycle back to this small area in Fieldbrook. Thank you. Oh, we have elk now. We lived there for 50 years, and all of a sudden we have bull elks in our yard, and hopefully they stay on their side and we stay on our side.
On behalf of Friends of the Lost Coast and the Bureau of Land Management King Range National Conservation Area, thank you for tuning in to Lost Coast Lectures. To view the complete archive of recordings from this series, or to learn more about our work inspiring a passion for nature, visit Friends of the Lost Coast online at lostcoast.org.